Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 77 of The Voices of Boyle. For this episode, I talk with Sean Nicholson about growing up at the foot of the Curlews, wild musical nights in Boyle, hilarious adventures in London, and all the characters he's met along the way. So grab yourself a cuppa and settle in, because you're going to love this trip back to the 80s and 90s. Sean, it's brilliant to have you on The Voices of Boyle. You're very welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let's go right back to where it all started, Sean. Growing up at the foot of the Curlew Mountains. From what I understand, the Nicholson household was a very musical one and also a bit of a rambling house. So bring us back into that scene. What was it like as a young fella growing up surrounded by music and storytelling?
It was, I suppose, it took music for granted. Our house was, well, we lived actually. I was born in at the foot in Doon, right? But we lived for a little while up at the top of the Curlews in the old teacher's residence. It's still there, and I think we were one of the first houses to have a TV. And people used to come into our house to watch the Reardons, different programmes on it. And then when that was over, the tea would come out, and then there might be a sing-song. And different things like that. I remember there was a guy, he used to, even though we were farming, we didn't have dairy cattle, and we used to buy milk. We used to buy milk off Jody Sheeran, Sean Sheeran's brother. And he used to come around and live with milk, and sometimes he'd have two fellas I remember, and I was only really small with him, Frank Chute, God rest him. Frank is dead.
I heard of him.
Frank and Micheál Scanlon. And they come in and they get a sing-song going. And as a kid, I suppose that planted thoughts in my head, I suppose, that I enjoyed it. And I think maybe I might have sang a song myself. I'd be taken out and sang a song in front of people. And that's how I got used to singing. So from that then, we started going to music lessons. We had moved down into the house down where we were reared, down across from McGlynn's in Deer Park, Tonnytaskin. And the house across the road is McGlynn's. There had be Jonathan McGlynn's granddad. And Jonathan McGlynn's granddad was a first cousin of my father. And his that's Tommy McGlynn. And Tommy's brother lived just up the road. And who lives in the house now, but Joe McGlynn lived there. And Joe was a famous fiddle player, and Tom was a famous flute player. But we used to go up to, my father used to go up to Joe's, and Joe would be teaching me bits and pieces on the tin whistle and on the fiddle. And I was going for lessons to Nancy O'Connor for music on the tin whistle, and later on the harmonica, and also singing lessons, singing an elocution. And Nancy was very, very strict, and I can still taste the chalk in my mouth, where she'd have 3 fingers wedged in your mouth for to open your mouth the width of 3 fingers, and your jaws would be breaking up. But she was very strict, and she had me singing "The Minstrel Boy." The minstrel boy to the war has gone, and the ranks of death you'll find him. And Joe used to, it's so bad, I'd forget the words again, because Joe used to tell me, the minstrel boy to the bog has gone, and the banks of turf you'll find him. And when I go back to Nancy, I get mixed up, and she used to go mad, and Joe really enjoyed like that. But that was just development. And
then did you play any other instrument?
Nancy O'Connor was a relation of my mother's, or my grandmother's, and she was taking a great interest in one of her relations learning the music, and she would not teach me guitar, learning guitar, because she says, "Oh, that's only for Beatles." She said, "They want them." She was prim and proper. She wouldn't teach us guitar. I don't know if she could play the guitar herself, but she refused to teach it. But I remember going out on the Ramboys and gathering money in the Ramboys, and my first guitar was bought above in Taylor's furniture shop for £4 10 shillings. Sorry, Bernie Flaherty, I didn't buy it off you. But £4 10 shillings, and that was the first guitar. And of course, like that again, I had the sore fingers and learning how to play it. And that my teens came on then, and I started playing in a band with John Joe and Kevin Conlon, Tony Mullaney from down in near Ballyfernan. And I wouldn't have been a master guitar player or that, but it was a great way of learning. And my father used to drive us around, and eventually, anyway, they got me onto the bass guitar because there was too many guitar players in the band. So they wanted a bass player. So it was self-taught on bass, learned a few riffs here and there, and learned it. And I went on from that playing bass, and afterwards moved. The people, there was different people in the bands then. That band sort of came and went, and there was a band formed, and the late Seamus Byrne, Seamus from up Tarman, he'd be Michael Byrne and Red Byrne's dad.
Okay.
And he worked with my father. Seamus would be my father's age, and my father driving us around, and he was the older guy. But what a singer! He was a fabulous singer. Seamus would sing all night long, never get a sore throat. I remember playing at Flynn's in Origna, and it was a competition between Seamus and the dancers. In Origna, they loved the old time waltzing, and Seamus would start off singing whatever old time waltz. The Turf Man from RD or whatever, and he'd go from one song into another, and he'd say, send them home sweating. They'd be dancing. I remember seeing these men, and they'd take out a white handkerchief and they'd be wiping the sweat off their forehead, and Seamus would still be going, and they'd see who's going to give in first. Are they going to leave the floor, or Seamus going to stop? That was a great experience of being able to keep playing, you know.
So that would have been, what age were you then, Sean, kind of when you were in the band in those days?
I started off playing, I suppose I was about 14. I was at the Conlons. I would have been up then 16 or so with Seamus Byrne and Anne Conroy, and Eamon Conroy's wife.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Anne's a fabulous singer. Fabulous.
Is she, right?
Oh, yeah, fabulous country singer, yeah.
Okay.
She was up there with Philip Millie Begley, or that standard. That time, like,
right,
for somebody just with not a full big band behind her, she still had that.
She had a great voice.
Oh,
never knew that now.
Yeah. She's great, and a lot of people probably nowadays, the younger people wouldn't know that about her.
Well, she never pursued it any time after.
She was married, and she had married, and she had kids, and that was it. And who else? John Clancy from Knockvicar. John, he's I mean, what he's doing now. He moved away. He's a teacher. John will have been the keyboard player in that band, and moved on then to. I started working in Castlereagh with television shop in Castlereagh there, and I met Dean Lane in a chipper, and Dean says he was starting a band and he was looking for a bass player, and I says, but you play bass? And she says, but I want to play guitar. And he was starting this band, and when I go and I was shy about it because I knew that Dean was a very, very good bass player, and I would be feeling insecure, I suppose.
Filling in the boots for him, was it? Yeah. Okay.
And he says, I'll show you a different. There was a sort of lessons came out of this as well, you know. And I suppose that's where I really got into playing the bass. So I remember playing with Dean for a good while and round about the country. And we used to come in. I remember coming into your mum's place, Dad, the little chick would come back from a gig, and it was sort of like religiously in for the fish and chips and the feed, and that's it. So that was your pastime them days.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Sean, like growing up in Boyle back in the 70s and 80s, as a young fella, you were into music, obviously, so you had that kind of outlet. Apart from that, what else was there for young people to do that you can remember?
Out in the Rockadoon, there was several different, I suppose, attempts at different things for during the winter times. My dad, this is now before we started playing music, he would have bought a football, and he bought a football home from work. He would mad into football, Gaelic football and that. And we used to go in. The field next door was O'Dowd's field, Tommy O'Dowd's there, but Seamus O'Dowd's dad, Seamus O'Dowd's field now, and who owns it now? But we used to go into that big field playing football, kicking the ball, and the Keenan lads, they were older than us, John and Micheál and Anthony and Noel. They would go up, and my father was sort of organising all this, and the next thing they decided, now I would have been really good bit younger than them, decided to get a team together and put it into the street league. There was a street league going on in Boyle.
The street leagues, yeah.
And there was Main Street, and there was Patrick Street and Elfin Street and
Marion Road, probably. I think. Yeah.
There was a street called Doon Street, which was Doon. It wasn't the street, but that was their team, Doon Street Celtic.
Okay.
And they actually won it, which the townies mightn't have liked, at times. But there was a bit of. But that was one of the things. Then there was tug of war. And they had a tug of war team, and they'd be training that up in Taskin School. Joe Tormey, God rest him, he just died recently.
That's right, yeah, he did, yeah.
Joe was one of the trainers, and Tommy Rock, God rest him, Tommy was the anchor man, huge big man on the end of the rope, and he used to train out at Taskin School, and what he had them doing, there was a bucket of a digger, and it was filled up with metal and stones, and a chain tied around it, and a pulley on the tree, and another pulley at the bottom. And they had to pull the bucket up the tree. That was the
training.
That was the training, yeah. That was for pulling the bucket up a tree. And they had two buckets. They had one that a single guy could do it, and one that the team would do it. That was their training. And then when they were, Joe Tormey had them, this is the team, they were training for the All-Ireland. And Joe Tormey had them eating raw liver for iron. And it was a real strict training regime. Run down to the Doon shore, then down the hill, but run up backwards, which was building up the backs, the muscles of the legs. Okay. And I was only younger, wouldn't have been old enough to make the team or strong enough, but I used to do the training, and that was torture.
I'd say so.
It was great, though. It was great. It was keeping you fit.
A different mindset for how to train, especially running up backwards back in.
Oh yeah. But it was Joe knew what he was doing. Joe Tormey, I think he pulled tug of war on some big team with that, but he knew all about tug of war
and the technique.
And there was Jane Sharkey's was an uncle or granddad. He was another man big involved in the team, and her dad, I think, used to be out there as well. But they had Eamon Conroy as well, was another person out of the town. It wasn't all people from Doon that pulled on it, but it was the Rocket Doon tug war team. And I forget.
Never heard about that before, yeah.
They went very, very, did they come second or something in All-Ireland? Like, they were a good team.
Okay, interesting.
The Egan's and the McLeans, Liam McLean and Francis, and the Egan's. My brother Pat was on it. Tommy Rock would have been, as I say, a big character in it. And but definitely, well, that was a good time. Yeah.
And school years, Sean. What was school like?
School was man. I left secondary school early. I left in. I went to Deer Park School now because, as I said, we lived on the top of the Curlews, and when we moved down to the bottom, there was no point in changing. We continued to go on to, but we used to walk up the hill up to school there, up the side road, up at the side of Keenan's.
Yes, I do.
And that comes out at Higgins's above on the top. And then the school it's knocked now, but it was across from that teacher's residence right on the top of the hill. Okay. So up and down there, that was the... I went to St. Mary's for 2 years and packed it in.
Had enough. And then I went back into working life. Worked for a while in Bowles and Boyle. Wasn't me.
Right. So I worked for the famous John McGrath fireplaces and headstones.
Oh, out to Carrick Road.
Out to Carrick Road,
originally from Longford.
He was originally from Oma.
Oh, was it? Okay. They moved to Longford then, I think, after, was it? Because I would have been in school with Glenn, one of his sons.
Well, he came from Oma, and he set up shop originally in just up the green in one of them places where Matt Burke is now. Yeah, he's making fireplaces, and he moved out. He moved out there then. Well, I was doing the inscriptions on the headstones, and that was great, interesting work. You know, it's enjoyable to do to see a blank piece of granite and you mark it out, and you put on you mark out the template on the stone, and then blast it and see it coming from just nothing to a nice sort of work of art. And there's headstones I've done around some places and graveyards round about.
Interesting. And he was an interesting character by what I hear.
Definitely was interesting. He was, but you know something? He had a great heart. He was known for being contrary and maybe being aggressive and that. But if you went out to John, he might have had a huge row with you. You know, if you went out to him and said, "John, I'm really on the breadline here, I'm stuck for something," he would put his hand in his pocket and give you half of what he had got himself.
Yeah.
You know, he was that type of guy. He had a good heart at the same time, even though, and I think his image, he liked, the hard man image, he liked to portray that on it, but he was a softie in the end, you know.
Yeah. The site out there there's been nothing done with it since they left. It's just kind of in...
I think your man O'Connor has cabins on it, I think.
Well, there is cabins on it, yeah, but there's nothing been done with that site since, I don't think, hasn't there? Yeah.
No.
So then, moving on, Sean, you moved to London in the 80s, 86?
Moved to London. I went to Anco in Sligo and qualified in electronics. And that's what took me to Castlereagh, working for a TV shop.
Okay.
And I moved. There wasn't much happening in Ireland. Like, all right, you get a job, and it was sort of, it wouldn't even be minimum wage now. Like, it was the money was very, very bad. And
there was a recession as well in the 80s.
There was a recession. I remember meeting. We'd be messing around. They'd be hanging around, talking to your mates and that, and everybody out of work. Everybody out of work, and headed off to London. And I was first week in London. I was working on a building site, and the plan in London was to go and get a job in electronics, not to work on the building site, seeing that I was qualified as an electronics engineer. And done a week in the building site, I was thinking myself, coming home on the tube, I was looking at the paper, hundreds of jobs. You know, and the Evening Standard that time, you had a section in it, or a page. There'd be pages like in the Sunday paper here in Ireland, Independent was the only one that you get jobs in, and there might be one or two pages of jobs for everything, for doctors, nurses, whatever, carpenters, whatever, and that would be at one or two pages, but. In London, the Evening Standard, the Thursday, I think, paper was dedicated to engineering. And the paper was packed full with jobs, hundreds of jobs. And I said, there should be no problem getting that. But the only problem I had is I was covered in muck from head to toe, working on a building site. And how could I go in and do an interview for a job? So I said, I had to figure this one out. And I remember I was friendly with Eamon Malevy, God rest him. He's passed now as well. Eamon taught karate up in Taskin School, and he taught it here in the hall. Eamon was originally from Elfin. And he went over to England, and he was working as a security guard first. And then he had moved down to Bexhill-on-Sea by the time I went over there. But he got a job. He says, it's quite easy to get a job as a security guard. So seen jobs for security guards, went for it. Great. Money wasn't great, not near as good as what you'd be working on the buildings, but you were getting enough to get by on, plus the fact you were clean. And a lot of the time you were working night time, so you had plenty of time during the day to go for an interview for a job. I said, this is it. So I was working in a place called Universal Oil Products to put the catalyst into fuel. What I was actually mining, what was the main what would I call it? The main expensive stuff that was on site was liquid platinum, I was in a big safe, but it was a big chemical plant. And night time I used to sit there with the Evening Standard, writing out applications for jobs and sending them off, and so I was only there a few months, and I got called for an interview for British Telecom, and I got called for an interview for Granada TV. So, right, got called for an interview for Granada TV, thought it went well, thought the British Telecom one went well, we'll be in touch with you. So Granada TV got in touch with me that week and says they were offering me a job. Great, lovely. Packed in the security guard's job, and now security guards, I was being paid weekly, every week, and weekly wage. So I went working for Granada TV, and I got a company van to bring home, the use of it, and I was delivering TVs around London and setting them up and demonstrating them, showing people how to use video recorders to do internet, and that right around in the city. One of the people, the first customers that I delivered to was Des O'Connor, the famous TV presenter, and so that'll give you. I suppose he was probably tied in with Granada TV because I'd say a lot of those programs, and I don't know what the crack was. But he lived down in Maida Vale. But anyway, after I think 3 weeks or so with Granada TV. Oh yeah, you went on the monthly salary with Granada TV, but you didn't get paid the first month because
hand.
You were cut off. There's a cut off date, right? So they had to go for 6 weeks, right? So I'd gone from weekly wages, and you had an awful lot saved, you had a little bit saved up, right? And then I had to go for that for 6 weeks without anything, right? So like you were skimping for the 6, but I was going to get a fairly good wage at the end. I was a monthly salary then, so that's grand. Lo and behold, didn't British Telecom contact me? Sent me for a medical. I was an off day. I had to go have a medical, and an aptitude test and a medical, and sent me a telegram to offer me the position, and I had to present myself here in I think it was Palmer's Green, down for the first day. So packed in my job, giving me notice at Granada TV, because there was a no-brainer. Like the job with British Telecom was
more in your line.
Not that it was more in my line, but like the wages was
okay.
The conditions you were getting in like to a job, a really good job there, you know, and gone through to a really good job with British Telecom. Here we go. British Telecom was fortnightly paid, right? So now I've gone so many weeks into 6 weeks without no pay, and I had to go another 2 weeks, right? So basically 8 weeks, and coming that last week, I was scratching, but I got through it, and that was it. But I was working.
You got the windfall then.
I got the windfall then, but that was the only hard time I had seen in London. But amazing, when I went to London, then I started up. I got staying with a guy in Tottenham who was a friend, sleeping on the floor on a sleeping bag until I got sorted out. And he knew somebody that got a bed set. I went into this bed set, and I was grand, moved up to that, and that was just up the road in Edmonton. And coming down Edmonton High Street, who did I meet? Only Frankie Tarpey and Jerry Morris. And hi, what are you doing here? I just all over, whole crowd back from Boyle. We're up on the Great Cambridge Road. We all live in a house together, so a whole pile of people from Boyle moved into Edmonton as well. It's coincidental. And Anthony Morris and Fidelma, and
they were all over there too.
They were all over there, all at the same time, but happened to move into the same area. So that was crazy. You know?
Jeez, yeah, kind of.
You were going to say something there?
No, I was just going to actually say about, moving from Boyle to London. That was your first time abroad, I presume, Sean.
That was it, yeah.
So there was a bit of a culture shock, not so much, but there was obviously a bit of a rural Boyle to kind of vibrant London in the mid 80s? Like, was it a big shock to the system? Did you adjust really quickly, or was it a slow process?
Yeah, sort of. Probably. Look, it was good on the fact that I was never out of work. Like I came, I left Boyle, and I had whatever, maybe 100 quid saved up, and my passage on my ticket on the boat, which was a bus to bus Aris, and the bus Aris took you out to Dunleary, and you're gone on the boat. Another coach picked you up in at Holyhead, and down the road then, and drop you at Victoria Station, to where the late Emma Malidi met me and brought me down to Bexhill and say, first, give me the run around what to do and that. And funny enough, I was that time, I was actually shy about going in with my Irish accent tasks in shops, you know. It was like, they might say something to me, you know. But no.
Did you have any trouble in that aspect?
No. There was a couple of times, I'd say, you got the dig, but it was, look at you, they blow off. Now, funny enough, when I go back talking about my time playing there, the only one ever I got a hard time with, hard time from, with playing music and that, was Irish people.
Okay, right.
It was, if you went into an English pub, and I hope the taxman isn't listening now, or the taxman from the UK. If you went into an English pub and you played, and the price was made, was arranged beforehand, right? The Englishman would have that money in an envelope with the name of the band, and they'll put up on a shelf, right? And when you're finished playing, you're called over money, and they give you the envelope, and that's correct every time. No need to check it. But Paddy, when he was paying you, geez, no, there wasn't that many in tonight. Is there any way you'll do it? Will you do it for a bit less? I says, well, the last time we were here, you had a huge crowd, and I didn't ask you for more.
No. Yeah, so it evens itself out.
It evens itself out. Like, he'd always try it on. But that was, and as well as that, again, another employer that I went to, so later on, I'll tell you later on, because it'll probably lead up to the story of how it happened, but the guy tried to do me as well, and he was an Irish guy.
So we'll get into the music scene then. You went over there, you were obviously working with BT.
Yeah. Was
your plan when you were going over there, apart from getting work, Sean, had you kind of notions about maybe music over there as well?
I brought the guitar with me. I had a lovely Hegstrom fretless bass guitar, which I bought off Eddie Lee, or dealt with him, Eddie Lee in Sligo, and it was a lovely guitar, and it was a rear guitar as well, and I had that with me, but I didn't have an amp. But I said I'd be able to, I couldn't carry an amp with me, but I was able to carry the guitar in the case, and but I wasn't playing. And the time I'm telling you about, when times was hard, right, I went from that period from a weekly wage to a monthly wage to nearly 2 months before I got paid, as the times was tight, and I wouldn't phone home for
a dig out.
I would be too proud to do that. I hocked the guitar, and I brought it into a second-hand a pawn shop. And the guy says, well, look, he says, the way we work here, he says, I'll give you 100 quid for the guitar, which is worth a lot more. And he says, but he says, when if you want to buy it back inside a month, you can come, this is a ticket, you can come and you buy it back, and we'll charge you, I think it's 50%. So it'll cost you 150 to buy it back, but it's well worth 150, right? And as soon as my wages came in, I went down to buy it back. Your man wasn't there, and the other guy knew nothing about it, and my guitar wasn't there.
And you never got it back? Never
got it back. But as my grandmother used to say, that all bad luck goes.
Yes, exactly.
But anyway, I was looking around to see, because British Telecom was finished at 4 o'clock in the evening. Well, no, tell a lie. Officially we're finished at 5:20. But we'd be finished at 3 o'clock in the evening. And what I used to do was I could come home when I got up on the plane. I lived about let's say about 2 miles away from the depot, and what I do is I come home at 2:30 or 3 o'clock when I was finished, and go and have a couple of hours kip. And I wake up then, I set the alarm, wake up then, maybe 5:10, bring the van back to the yard, and grand. I'm ready then, I'm fresh for to go out and do a gig. Now, when we were going well, first of all, I wasn't playing. I was with British Telecom. I says, it's an opportunity here for to get playing. I'd be well able to do it, to do jobs. So, looked, played with a band here or there. I bought myself a guitar off the paper like buy and sell. Bought a nice little West Tone bass and an amp, and then started looking for how to buy a car then for transport, because the British Telecom van, you couldn't use it for private use. But that was easy enough to get a car there. So stepping here and there with different bands, maybe doing a gig here with one band that was stuck, somebody was on holidays, and the plan was to get our own band together, my own band together, but that took a bit of time. But I was playing with a few different Irish bands at different pubs. But I realised then, because over here when I played, like there was no such thing as breathalyzer or something like that. So you could have a few pints every night and play and drive home, and there was no heat passed. Different story in England, and I had a good job that I needed my licence for, because I was going around as an engineer in the van with British Telecom, so I couldn't lose my licence. So it was the first experience from when I was a young lad of actually playing stone cold sober, drinking Coca-Cola and up and after a few gigs I was fine with it, and I never drank there. I was drinking Coke. I remember coming from a gig one night in it was way down South London, and there was a guy called Frank McKenna with me, a Scottish guy, and Frank was a reformed alcoholic, and we're coming up through Liverpool Street, and I came around the corner, blue lights, stopped me. There were a checkpoint on the road. So pull over here, sir. Yeah. And he says, can you step out of the car? I said, okay, step over here onto the footpath. He says, and he was looking at the gear, like it was, the gear was in the back. It says, the seat used to be let down and the gear was all thrown in, guitar cases and amplifiers. And he was looking at me, and he looked at his watch and he tapped his watch. He says, could you tell me what time it is, sir? And I didn't have a watch, and I looked into his watch, and I read the time of his. I says, you know something, you're after coming across something very, very rare here tonight. He says, what's that? I says, you're meeting, I says, a Scotsman and an Irishman on the way home from a pub, and we're both sober. And
he didn't believe me though, did he?
Oh, he knew. He didn't know I was sober. He knew because, like, he probably had all his tricks. His mate came down then and handed him a breathalyzer bag. He says, do you need this? He said, no, I don't think we need that this time. Right. So he didn't know, but it probably was an unusual thing though.
I'd say so, especially with the music stuff in the
Scottish and Irish coming from. But that was the way it was. We played, as I said, we met some great characters. There was this guy, a fellow called Tim Theo. He was I met him actually, first time I met him was at Anthony Morris's wedding. Anthony and Fidelma, their reception was up, was it in Luton or Hampstead Heath or someplace, I forget. But I was at it, and he had this band playing at it. And there was a guy from Dublin, Jim Slattery, a great drummer. He was, Jim drummed with the Joe Loss jazz quartet or Joe Loss jazz orchestra. Jazz drummer, legendary throughout London. And he'd been living in London all his life, but a lovely, lovely man. And there was another guy called Kim, and Kim was a Chinese guy. Great guitar player, but his timing was rubbish. And he was a pure chancer, but like he still could get gigs, and he'd go in and he'd say what he needed to say for to get a gig, but whether he was able to live up to it or not was a different story. But he rang me one time and he says, Sean, man, he says, there's two funny stories of him. Sean, man, he says, we've got a gig, he says, for he says St. Patrick's Day, he says, down in Croydon in the Nurses Social Centre in Croydon. And he said, big crowd here. And he says, Jim Slattery is going drumming at me. I want you for bass. He says, do you know anybody can play guitar and sing? And Frank McKenna, the Scottish guy I was talking about earlier, Frank would sing country songs and 60s and 70s stuff all night long and play the guitar as well. I said, Frank is the man. And Frank didn't drive. And of course, I picked up Frank and went down there and we met Jim below. And no sign of Kim. And Kim was always late. And he'd be stuff breaking down and crackling, and we got our gear set up anyway, and Kim arrived in at 8 and he was rushing and he was trying to get stuff set up and there was plugs broken, and my mother had sent me over a little plastic bag of shamrock, and I took out the shamrock, put a bit in my coat, and I handed it to Frank, and Frank put in a bit, knew what it was, and of course Jim knew what it was put in. And I handed the bag back to Kim, the Chinaman, and he says to me, hide it, he says, we'll smoke it later. So there's a Chinaman smoking shamrock in an Irish club. But another time we were playing, and he says he had a gig on a Sunday afternoon, and we were playing in this pub, St. John's Tavern. It's just down from the Archway Tavern. A lot of people who was in London would remember it was a famous Irish pub, but it was a Sunday afternoon, and the clientele now was probably back in. They were set in a time warp. I always said they were like back in the 70s. They were. This is the mid to late 80s, but these were set back in their attire and their hairstyles and whatever, and drinking pints of Guinness, and they've been there probably in London from the 70s, but never changed, probably never even went home. But there was a problem that I seen arise in Irish pubs. You'd be asked to sing a rebel song, and I was wondering, this could be trouble now. You're trying to suss out the audience, and I remember asking, God rest George Manani. George had been over a few years before me. I says to George, how do you work with that? George says, simple. He says, what I do, he says, if they ask to sing a rebel song, tell them to ask the governor. That's the boss of the pub. And if he says it's okay, and all hell breaks out, well, it's not your fault. He told them that's okay. Great idea, says. I must remember that one. So anyway, we were in St. John's Tavern on a Sunday morning. This guy comes up and he says to me, will you sing James Connolly? And I says, ask John. John Fitzgerald was the owner. And John was standing on the floor, and he went, I've seen him going up asking John. And John gave me the thumbs up. Oh, I do it, So I just put my hand over my mouth and I shouted over at Kim. I says, Kim, a special request for James Connolly. So Kim gets on the mic and he says, well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very, very special request. He says, could you put your hands together and give James Connolly a big round of applause? He's going to go up and sing for it.
Oh, good. But he was obviously a bit of a character.
No, he didn't know. He didn't know who James Connolly was. He didn't know the song,
but he was a bit of a character anyway, as in general. Like
he was. I remember him losing the license then for drink driving, and I used to pick him up. He lived in Camden Town, but he was funny. I lost contact with him, but a funny character, all right.
And did you find it hard to balance the? I know you said you wouldn't have been drinking in those days, playing music in the pubs, but did you find it hard, Sean, to balance, working during the day and then gigging in the evening and then getting up again, work?
Not really. If it was now, I'd find it hard.
Yeah.
But like I was a young man. As I said, like you had that bit of a power nap in the evening if you had a gig. Now, got our own band together, and we were a 3-piece. And Jim Slattery drummed with us for a while, and Jim used to get different drummers if he couldn't drum with us. The only reason he drummed permanently with us was because he used to go away for these jazz sessions, and no band would have him on because he might be gone for a few nights. But he always says, well, if I have to go, I'll get a good drummer for the depth for me. I said, that's no problem, we're not going to be stuck. So anyway, he used to get some gas characters. He had this guy, what his second name is, he drummed with Rod Stewart in Rod Stewart's young days. And he said, I'll get Uncle Albert for you. I said, Uncle Albert? I said, yeah. He said, your man has come up. And I said, God's sake, he said, don't call him Uncle Albert in front of him. I said, why? You'll see when you meet him. So we're playing down and I think it was the Old Kent Road, and we're pulled up, loading the gear into the pub. And I heard this putter behind me, and I turned round, and it was a little yellow Robin Reliant. And this guy got out with a duffel coat and a white beard. Uncle Albert.
All right.
This guy, he got up, he was an old guy, he got up and his get up and go had got up and gone as a drummer. He was so, it's probably was a good drummer in his day, but there was no drive to him, and playing with him was hard because you were trying to drive him on, me as a bass player. And he used to have a flask of coffee. He didn't drink. He had a flask of coffee at him on the stage. Well, I didn't drink. I drank Coke, but he came prepared, and that was it. But it's solely as a job for him, and there was no humour in it at all. Like, we had crack as well.
Yeah.
But Jim eventually left, and we got Jim Slattery. Another Jim, Jim Hogan, and Jim was a Scottish guy, great drummer, but. And he got this other guy, a friend of his called Jim Miller, who became a very, very good friend of mine. Jim passed away sadly there a few years ago. Jim was actually the same age as me. I think there was only, something like 10 days between our birthdays. And we shared a house together for a while as well. And he, as I said, became a personal friend. But we were a four-piece. We called ourselves Your Man. Your man.
Your man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because an English guy came up with that name. He says, a good idea. He says, because if you advertise that, people think there's only one person and they see four people. Your man is going to be. But Your Man and Stage 3, there was two different names we went under. But we went well then playing around the Irish, what would I call it, the Irish scene. It's sort of pub scene, more or less. We played some clubs. Camden Irish Centre was a famous one we played in. Another guy used to drum with us at a time, a guy called Kevin Mann. Kevin, a young fella, and his father was an agent. We used to use some agents as well for gigs, and the father got him in, or not his father, his uncle Billy O'Keefe from Tipperary, and Billy got this young fella. We were looking for a drummer one night, and he got this young fella, and he came in, and he's grand fella, wild character, but like this fella now would be in his early 20s, and he was playing an Irish band, but I won't say a larger outage. He was a character. He's just wild. He's capable of doing that thing. And there was an Irish centre we used to play in Langley out on a Sunday. It wasn't every Sunday. We probably one a month there. And a huge, it's probably as big as St. Joseph's Hall. A big stage with a curtain and everything on it. And backstage stuff, backstage rooms and all that, dressing rooms. But you had a load of gear in from the front of the hall. And they had bingo on before the band. A lot of Irish clubs had that as well. So we were going in, and they says, for God's sake, can you come before the bingo the next night? But if we came before the bingo and set up, we probably have an hour to wait around before we're playing. So we were leaving enough time, come down through London enough time to have the gear set up, and and ready to play. Sound check and straight in. But we said right the next day. So we used to try, but we always failed miserably to get everybody out on a Sunday evening time to get out before this bingo. So we'd be going in very quiet. And the floor, is polished floor. So, and probably if you had trainers on you or something, they were squeaking. And these real silent, serious bingo stuff, and there was tense and that, right? And went up behind the stage and up on the curtains. And Kevin was coming in with a box of cymbals, and we're putting stuff around and trying to go nice and quietly, and all tension outside. And the next thing you heard Jim Miller saying, "Oh, God's sake, don't man. And I said, what's he? I looked around, and here was Kevin Mann. There was a table. He stood up on the table. All the cymbals out the box up over his head. I said, don't. And he did. He dropped the cymbals. I thought there was going to be heart attacks and everything outside.
Christ, jeez. Divilment.
Just divilment, yeah.
And so, I know you came back in 96 permanently, but you came back before that because you were involved with the Oh No Somalia project.
That's right. Well, I didn't come back for the Oh No Somalia.
Okay.
what happened, how that came about, is before I got a voluntary redundancy with British Telecom, which was, I had no intention of taking it. And at the time, when I found out what I was going to get, it was a no-brainer.
An offer you couldn't refuse.
Not an offer I couldn't refuse, because my plan initially was in England, stay in England for maybe 10 years and have enough money saved up to come home. But I looked at this and I says, the money I was getting, I'd never have it saved in 10 years. I says, I'm 5 years into it and I have more money than I have saved in 10 years. So take this, and if it doesn't work out, I'll go home. And it didn't work out. I came home, and it didn't work out as it happened that time, and because there was still not much work in Ireland, even in that time. Ireland's picking up a little bit. But before I came home, I had ventured into songwriting with Jim Miller. Got me.
Well, you started songwriting while you were in
England, yeah.
Right.
So Jim used to write songs. I said, we should write a song. I said, you put the words down there. So next thing, I wrote a song myself and worked on it, and Jim got the arrangement to it, and we recorded a song called Drowned in the Shamrock and Paddy's Tour of Duty. Two songs that I wrote with Jim. And Paddy's Tour of Duty was actually recorded by Seamus Moore on an album, McGallis and McGanzy's album, I think it was. And it done very well for us. Like, financially, we were well rewarded for the song. I thought, this is a bit of money in this songwriting business, But it was crack as well. So Jim, we rented out a machine to record it as a demo. So I thought, I have a bit of money together now. So I got me up a redundancy, and I says, if I go back to Ireland now, I'm going to buy something that I can do a bit of recording and learn how to use this. So I bought this 8-track, Fostex 8-track machine. It's a second hand. And I came home to Ireland, and Brendan O'Dowd, was playing. He was playing well. He was going well around Boyle that time, and he had a problem with speakers. He came up to me. You wouldn't have speaker switch you. I brought a good bit of gear. I said I would. I said I bought speakers, and he borrowed them. I said, sure, look, I'm not playing. He said, use them until you get sorted, And the next thing, come here, says Brendan, I heard you had a machine for a Fostex 8-track or something like that. And I said, be any chance of getting it off you sometime? I have a bit of tracks for today now. And I said, there was other people asking me. So I had a house, the home house, right? I had it outside in Doon or in Deer Park, and wasn't living. I was living in. My mother and father moved into Patrick Street, and set up. I said, we'll set it up out there, and sure, you go out and use it. If anybody else wants to use it, you can bring your reels and. Oh, right, said Brendan. So that was a way of controlling everything. So I was going along the road, and I had listened to the radio. The Somalia famine had hit, and there was, God rest Frankie Simon. Yeah, Frankie was mad for the lay down tracks. He had stuff written that he would like to do and to demo them. And I thought it would be great to get all these musicians together to do something, a project for the famine. And I said to Brendan, and Brendan said, yeah, great idea, said Brendan. And, so we started thinking names: Frankie Simon, Tony O'Connor, Bernie Flaherty. The names started Jonathan McLean and the String Records. Brendan had a great time for the String Records, because he sort of, I think he had a good faith in them going somewhere,
Yeah.
And then there was, who else was there? There was the two Connolly, well, they're not sisters, a sister and aunt. Well, there was two sisters actually. There was
Mary Teresa and
Mary
Colette,
Teresa,
was it?
Mary Teresa and Colette was sister and aunt, and then Mary Teresa's sister Brenda, Bernie Garvey.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Great singer as well. So, and it was all the people who's put together, and Sean O'Dowd. Sean was actually supposed to do. I actually then. That's right. I damaged my finger. I fell off a horse, and the horse sliced the whole side, and they wanted to amputate the finger in Sligo, and I wouldn't let them. And I said, I know I played the guitar, I don't want to lose that. But I had a finger and it was out like that, it was solid. I couldn't bend it. And I could play with these three, but it was awkward, And
how long did that stay like that for then?
No, actually, it was like that for 6 months, and I went out to Dr. Loftus, and he sent me to Sligo he actually sent me up to the Plunkett home. There was a lady used to come there. She was a physio, as Lord Mershon and Kieran Nimitz used to call her, the physio-terrorist. She was a physio-terrorist, and she got my finger working again. Now, there's no feeling on the inside of it, but like the finger works perfect, and I didn't have to lose it. But I was like this during that project, so I couldn't really play much on the bass. And I done a song myself, scoring on his simplicity. And Frankie Simon did the accompaniment on it, and the arrangement, did a lovely job on it. And anyway, Sean decided, it was a sort of, Sean O'Dowd decided it was going to be a sort of for me, a rehabilitation thing for my finger, to get it working again, to go playing. And he was going to do a song. And Lord Mercy, Kieran Nimitz. Kieran was playing bazooka on it, I think, and Sean was playing guitar, and it never actually got on. But we worked on that song. That was one song didn't get on it, and also Berna, what's her name now? Helen Graham. Helen had a lovely song written that didn't get on. There was a bit of conflict of I won't say conflict of interest, conflict of opinions on arrangements and stuff, whatever happened. But anyway, pity didn't get on it. But we did have, it was 12 tracks that was fabulous. And Donny O'Connor wrote the title track, which is Oh No Somalia, which was released as a single as well.
And made it to number 3, wasn't it?
I think it was number 3 in the charts, I think, for the Christmas, which was great. And also, RTE News, whenever they're showing pictures of the Somalian famine, that time it was big, they used the track Oh No Somalia for the backing music, right, which was great buzz.
And didn't that get then kind of, I was only talking to Brendan McGee on his episode about, wasn't it re-released or kind of remastered or something a couple of years ago or something?
We're trying to do something, and there was some people thought it was best left.
Yeah.
Some other people thought it'd be great to do something, and it was sort of left. The interest, it's hard to get it to revive it up again. It would be lovely maybe if the group got together and done something similar, but on a different project. That would have been nice, you know.
Yeah,
but
there was I heard a funny story about the whole recording studio down in Townytaskell. And it was to do with, you were recording the Abbey Music Artist for Africa.
Yeah.
And you needed female vocal singers or something.
Yeah.
Do you remember this story?
No, go ahead. There's several stories.
Yeah, it was basically a car was sent from the house into town to try and rally up a few female backing singers.
Yeah.
And Kate Lavin's was the pub, because the music society was the music society in the hall or whatever.
Yeah.
They go down there after rehearsals for a few drinks. So it was what's her name? Michelle, Brendan McGee's sister, was rounded up, as well as a few others, and they were brought in to record.
Yeah.
But seemingly at 5 a.m. in the morning, there was...
that was regular, yeah.
Yeah, and there was... Donny O'Connor, I think, described it as a drunken choir of angels were singing, and
I came up with a line, I think. I was trying to sleep in the bed, and we were trying to work out harmonies, and it wasn't going great. And there was somebody, and Brendan, if there was any noise of laughter coming from the next room, there'd be a row with Brendan. Brendan was at us, and you see, you couldn't say anything funny. And so there was all silence. I says, "Sounds like Scanlons of a Christmas Eve."
That's exactly. Yeah.
And of course, there was laughter.
Yeah, of course. And I'd say Brendan hit the roof. But that was a great. They must have been great days though as well. Like that was 92, wasn't it?
That was 92, 91, 92. Yeah, it was great, and I think probably because a lot of them, like Brendan would have recorded before. The string records was dabbling in like a 4-track doing demos and that. And Frankie Simon would have definitely recorded before, and that it would have been in studios, and Bernard Flaherty. But most people wouldn't have had. That was on that. I think there was 25 people involved in the whole thing, Even Richard Connolly was the main studio manager there. He was keeping the fire on, he was keeping the kettle on, it was great. But I think because there was a buzz for some people to actually get in the studio now. It was a makeshift studio, but it worked, and the production came out to be top class.
So have you then, Sean, recently, are you still involved in music?
Still, I haven't done any live work much since COVID. I came home, as I say, when I come home,
96.
96. Yeah. You tell me, the memory is going now. Yeah, I played with a few different bands. Yeah, and during COVID, I had continued write. I still kept in touch regularly with my buddy Jim Miller. And we'd be over and back, and we'd be chatting. When Facebook came out, then we'd have regular chats. And Jim got very ill. It was a sort of a neurological condition that he claimed himself was from substance abuse. He was a regular smoker of the old wacky, and it affected his. I noticed it in him a good while when I've been going back. I met him a few times, and he was gone a bit like Ozzy Osbourne on the walk, like he was waddly in the walk. And now this man was a guy who, like, he fronted bands. He was on stage with the Pogues. Like he played in Leon Sane, he played harmonica with them at a big concert for MTV. You can see on MTV that he fronted a rock band called Eddie and the Hot Rods on a tour in Ireland, and I seen him playing with them, and he was been into karate and all that as well, but like for his image for the rock thing, he was able to do flying kicks and hit the cymbals and somersaults and everything on stage, and see him gone from that, and he was only the same age as me, to be hardly able to walk. And next thing he used to say, I'd say the circulation or something had gone, but anyway, he slowly went downhill. He got a seizure, and he was in a coma then for a while, keeping in a juice coma, because every time they tried to take him out of the coma, he went into a big seizure again, and they're afraid. But eventually got him out of the coma, and he was in a wheelchair. And I had gone back to see him a few times, and then he rang me one evening, and he says, "How are you, Jim?" And he was like, the first one he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I says, "Well, how was that going?" I used the Billy Connolly one. Well, he says, "I just have an uncontrollable urge for to interview people." So that's not the Parkinson's affecting him, but the Parkinson's. Then he was diagnosed with cancer. I said, "I got bad news today." I said, "Well, he got cancer." And I said, and I had been through cancer myself prior to that.
All right.
And he I says, like, how is? Well, he says, they've given me 12 months. And, I knew he wasn't going to last 12 months. And he had it in the throat. And then I used to ring him. And the FaceTime things slowly stopped because he wasn't able to talk. He wasn't able to talk. His voice was going. And it would be messaging on Facebook. And he says, "Say a prayer for me." I'm in for an operation tomorrow, I'll see you on the other side. And they went in to put a tube down his throat so as he could eat. And his throat, his lungs was gone so bad is that it was collapsing on the pipe, and they aborted the operation. And he came out, and they built him up again for another week or so. And his sister, who hadn't met until his funeral, his sister Catherine, there's only one sister, she came down and she told me what he says. He was going in to the operation the second time, and he always witty to the end, the Scottish wit. I'm going in again now, and the doctor said to him, "I hope he doesn't fuck it up again this time." But he didn't come out of the operation. He passed away, and I was sad. But what was I?
There was great, great characters as well. Like you would have, met. Obviously, your time in Boyle over in the UK.
I met actually through when I went back the second time. The job, not name dropping or anything, right? The job I had was a cable TV And I was ended up being an installation supervisor with them, and it was down in Kensington and Chelsea. So you were in famous people's houses every day of the week. And a funny story, I'll tell you. I was a service technician with them first when I joined with Videotron was the company, and like in Kensington and Chelsea, and that you were, as I said, you were famous people. And down in Chelsea Harbour, it was all people sort of tied up to royalty and politicians and VIPs of all descriptions. So I was actually in Roger Taylor's apartment, drummer of Queen. And my daughter had been born, Zoe had been born at that time, and she was only a toddler and just coming off the trying to get on solid food. And Roger Taylor's wife was there, and they had a baby the same. Roger wasn't there himself, it was the wife. They had a baby the same. I was fixing the TV, and we're trying to get her on solids. I said, "Oh, do you know what we give our baby?" She said, "You know when you get the Chinese takeaway and you get the prawn crackers?" I said, "They just melt." That's a great idea. So I have the chat about that, right? So left that apartment, right? My next job was another VIP. It was written VIP, right? Looked at the name on the docket. Yes, I says, that name, I don't know wonder who he is, a VIP. So, customer very irate. There's lines on the TV screen, and this is, it's 3 engineers called before, and none of them has repaired this. And he's really going on, he's he's a very, very irate VIP customer. So, I went up, and it was a Chelsea Mews at the back of Harris' shop, a house, and I went up and I knocked on the door, and this guy came out, and straight away I knew him. You know, you see somebody, and I know that face who had a shell suit on him and black beard and that, and comes out, and I went into the room, and the room was there was a big grand piano on the floor. You could polish it, you could shave on the polished wood on it, and there was different instruments hanging around on the wall, And I looked at his TV, and he says, the last engineer says I need a booster. And I looked, I said, well, them pictures doesn't look like it. Them pictures, if they're they look too strong, right? I said, I might need an attenuator to bring the signal down, because that can cause like a pattern on the screen if it's amplified too much. Well, he says, look, are you going to effing sort it for you? I said, let me have a look first. And I went to move the box, and went these lines across the screen. And that's it, he says, that's what I was doing. I said, that's static lines. He said, yeah. So I started moving stuff, and I moved cables. And when I moved the cables, there was something loose that was going. So I says, got each cable individually, and I shook them until I got the cable of his TV. The cable of his TV had a 2-pin, there were continental plug. It was wedged into a square pin socket. And when you shook it, it was causing an arc across the TV. I said, that's the problem. What's that? I said, it's your television that's the problem, not the cable. Well, can you not fix it? I said, well, actually, I'm not allowed to touch your TV because it's your problem. He says, so, and I sort of took pity on him, because look, he was messed around. I said, I says, have you got a plug? I says, all you need is get a plug. Yeah, I didn't know how to put on a plug. He says, if you have a plug, I said, I'll put it on, but I didn't touch it. As far as it comes, no problem. He goes away, and he comes back with bits of plugs. There were pieces. Got them in a drawer somewhere, and I make up a plug out of this. So I got my snips, and I was down, and he said, would you like a drink of coffee or tea? I said, I'll have a tea. So, we ain't got a tea, And I was down cutting this, and I was still trying to figure out who he was, thinking, who is he? And I looked up, and there was a mandolin over me on the wall. He came in, he was chatting, and I said, you play a bit of music, And he started sort of laughing. He said, every bit I can, And I looked around, and I looked up on the wall, and I seen a gold disc, the Beatles, and the penny dropped. It was Ringo Starr. And the name on the docket was Richard Starkey, which is his real name, Ringo Starr. I didn't know that. I never knew that. Oh, I says, you're Ringo Starr. And I says, I come for that. I says, I says, I didn't, I figured that, he says. And he says, I says, I said, I don't know my ass, but I have to get your autograph. He says, wait till I see will you fix me fucking television first. So he made the tea, he chatted me what part of Ireland, great. And so I was going away, and he says, I said, here, I have to get your autograph. Yeah, have you something to sign? I said, here, sign this, the back of the docket. He signed, I have that docket laminated and framed. That's Ringo
Brilliant.
and a star.
Brilliant.
But I says that was probably the biggest understatement of the century. Ask him on the Beatles if he played a bit of music.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And I think the fact that I didn't know him, met him, I'd say more sort of open to me, because I wasn't just going in and annoying him, because you are who you are. But
for some reason, when you said that this VIP, when he opened the door, he was in a shell tracksuit.
You still thought it was, did you?
No, I thought you were going to say someone like Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile, I'd have known him and ran. Because I was only a young fella at the time.
That's what I was going to say. But,
dear.
So when you moved back to, what was the reason behind moving in 96 then back?
That time then, I was working, as I said, for that company, Videotron. And Videotron, there was different parts of London who had licenses for different boroughs for cable TV. It wasn't like Boyle here, where Tom Murray had the whole town to himself. London was divided up into boroughs, and each company came in and had so there was United Artists, there was Videotron, there was and I can't think of the rest of them. There's a good few of them. And as I said, I was working as an installation supervisor, which was like a frontline manager out in the field. What I was doing is I was managing installs in there was several contractors. Well, there was 2 contractors I was over, and like if there was problems, I had to sort them, but I had to plan a lot of the installs, because all the cables in London was run underground, and if they had to bring in the cable, just an idea that they had the problems they had to lift the manholes. Somebody parked in a manhole. Can't do nothing here. There's somebody over the manhole, and that was it. So they started putting out. We came up with the idea that where that manhole was, we put a parking restriction on that parking bay, and it was up on a board on the pole beside it. So if somebody parked on that, they got towed. Yes, you see, they were illegally parked, so they got towed. So that was the only way around it. But like that sort of stuff, planning that out, and then, of course, with it being where it was, the famous people, a lot of famous people I met that was nice. There's a lot of them that was assholes, you know, and they. You know, if anything went wrong with your thing, they had to be treated special. But you had to just go in and sort the problem out. But anyway, Videotron was being sold out, and they were being taken over by Cable and Wireless, and them and United Artists was being taken over by Cable and Wireless. There was a merger, right? And the word on the ground was that there was going to be a lot of redundancies, obviously, when these mergers happen, and they'll be scaling off at management level first, you know. So I thought to myself, redundancy will be coming again. I said, but this time I'm going to try and organise, because Zoe wasn't 1 year old, and I decided that wanted to move to Ireland. If I didn't move when she was, before she started school, I would have been in London. The 10-year plan for London was gone out the window. So I says, right, so I started looking for jobs in Ireland. So I applied to the Irish Embassy to see how many telecommunications companies was operating here, and it sent me back a big list, and one of the lists was Cable and Wireless, who was taking over our company. So I rung them up and asked them, was there any vacancies going in Ireland? And I explained that I'm working with Videotron, who's been taken over, and I said, there's no problem going back on the tools again. And she says, well, what part of Ireland would you like to work in? And I says, well, I was thinking Dublin, Cork, Galway, wherever, what city. I was thinking you had to go to a city. And I says, well, I don't really mind any place. I just went back, well, we've got a vacancy in Sligo if that would suit. I thought, wow. So I applied for the job and I got it, and I was with them. I moved over then with cable and wireless. And that's what brought me home, you know. But I was back there a few times. As I said, back with Jim, since I was back a few other times. But I wouldn't live over there now.
Yeah, that's a different word. And even I'd like to ask you is how have you seen Boyle change from what it is now to what it was when you were a young fella?
Actually, it changed completely for me, because when I came home that time, I, funnily enough, felt a stranger in my own town.
Really?
Yeah, I felt that. My wife, who I met over there, better give her a mention, Zita, she's from the far side of Sligo, up Mullaghmore. And we moved here, the two of us. We built a house out in Doon, out beside the brother, out in Shigora, and she couldn't settle. I suppose she came from beside the sea as well, and she was hoping to move back there. And I wasn't like people that I used to hang around at, like in my grown up days, the likes of Bernie Flaherty, Donny O'Connor. They had grown up, and they weren't going out for a pint. So like what you did every night, you met for a pint, or you met during the day. We were going up to town, and we were Kieran Nimitz saying a lorry load of volunteers. But going up to town, all up for, and we'd be drinking a Morris and that. But that scene had all changed. I came back, and the people now that was in the pub, I'd be asking Bernie Flaherty, who's that? And that's Situa's son. And they're growing up, they're only and that was only in a space of 11 years.
Yeah.
You know, but moved down to Sligo and got settled. I'm settled in a community there now, and I'm retired now. I'm a pensioner.
And how long are you down in Sligo direction?
I must be there 20 years. Yeah. As I say, settled down. There's only it's coming to the twilight part of the life now, you know.
And Sean, if you had to think back to your younger self, what would be one piece of advice you give your older self, if you could?
I don't. Ooh, that's a hard one now. I don't think I'd change anything.
Well, have you any regrets then?
None. None. I had a great look at any advice I give to anybody going to London. Probably the generation now would know that. But when I was going to London, there was a lot of guys going over there, and they were thinking of the dollars, and they were, like, as I said, I was with British Telecom, and the money was good. Not alone was good, it was steady. I was on a salary, and that was it. Like, win, lose or draw, you had your money was coming in every month. There was guys over there, and they're working in the building, and sometimes they'd be shown a pay packet that they could earn twice what I was earning. But they were earning that twice for maybe 3 weeks, and then there might be 2 weeks that have nothing. So averaging out, they were working out less than me. But it looked good, all right. But then there was a lot of fellas I seen when, as I said, the first week I was there, I worked on the building site. I seen a guy, which is a sad case, they call him Black Jack. And the warmest day, he used to wear 3 donkey jackets. And the warmest day that ever came, there's one donkey jacket, never came off him. And he probably lived in them, and he lived in a bed set over a pub, and he didn't have a bank account. He used to go to the pub to get his check cashed, and he was sad because I was there 11 years, and I found a change when I come back, but he could be there 25, 30 years.
Massive.
And there'd be a massive change. He wouldn't know his people was there, and he didn't have people because he was living from the pub to the bed set, and that was his life. So he was isolated. And I've seen a lot of guys like that. But then once I remember I said about the people, that would have you over, the Irish guys. The great scam was the big contractors that had a pub, right? And you went over to England, everything was done, a bank account, right? You need your passport, you need ID, go in and set up a bank account, an address, the whole lot, like. And these guys working, maybe labour in the building, didn't have that stuff. They hopped on the train, they went over, and they didn't bother. So an easy way out is that the pub cashed the check. And I've been in the pubs, and they had a thing like like a hatch that had bars in it and the whole lot, like you'd see in a bank.
Yeah.
And there you go up and you give in the check. Well, we having the money and you go up and get a few pints on the tab.
Yeah.
And they held them the whole night in the pub.
There was a documentary I watched on YouTube a couple of months ago, and it was about the Irish back in the day working,
Yeah.
even before the 80s or 90s. And it was the same premise. That scam, as you said, was going on.
Oh, that was going on, yeah.
The pub the landlord of the pub was also the owner of the building site or whatever, and you'd be working on the building site.
McGovern's in Kilburn was one of them. I played in the pub upstairs, a rocking pub, but there was a few other pubs that did the thing. Actually, one character I met, Boyle man, I was saying about everybody from Boyle being over here, going back to the early days when I started having my own band. We used to get some gigs off an agent. This agent sent us down to this pub in Hackney, the Dolphin. And Jim Slattery said, geez, this fella, he says down there, he says, he's an ex-boxer, he says, and he's a big man, he's being very contrary, he says, you wouldn't want to step on his toes, And he says, very contrary, he says, how do you get on? He said, well, our man fell out with him, I says, I saw it, we went and we played. He said, be telling you down. He says, turn it down, and we did like we played. Huge big man. And I was carrying the gear out, and it was a lovely night, and the car was parked. We had to move the car to park, but we couldn't leave it parked, so we parked it back up when we were loading the gear on. It was out across a rail, and he was holding the door open, not letting anybody in for late. He was very, very strict, And I was carrying the gear out, and I said, nice night. No, he says, that's grand. I says, what part are you from Ireland yourself? He says, yeah. He says, what part are you from? Roscommon. I said, oh. So what part of Roscommon? You wouldn't know what Roscommon. He says, in a place outside Boyle called Knockvicar. I did joking. Who was it? Joe Sheeran. He was a brother of Aidan and Aidan Reyes.
Okay.
And he had chatting to him, and I loved to be great buddies with him, and we got gigs off him regularly, like
brilliant.
Handing him and I never knew that he was a brother of his over there, like the owned the Dolphin. I don't know if he's still alive, like he was an elderly man at that time, but a grand fella, but he was, that was the crack.
Jeez. And what, I suppose, if you could relive one day from your past, Sean, what day would that be and why? If you had to pinpoint one.
I was with my wife for 33 years and we got married the year during COVID. So she'd be listening to this. It has to be the wedding day.
It wasn't a trick question either. 100%.
I know what side my bread is buttered.
Before we wrap it up, Sean, is there anything else you'd like to touch on that we haven't talked about?
I think I'll probably think of something down the road.
I know, it's always
there's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff. Well, look, it's great to have the chat with you, and I know there's a few eager ears that are going to be waiting for this episode to come out, because when I mentioned to a few people you were coming on, they were like, brilliant, you'll have some great stories from the UK and the music there.
Probably more will come up, like as I said, the characters like that I met from Boyle, and it ended up to be a little community. Like Kilburn is an Irish community, or Cricklewood, but this was a little Boyle community above an Edmonton. That was the other side, was over in actually exactly North London,
right,
where Cricklewood and Kilburn is sort of like northwest,
right,
northwest London. They'd be directly north.
Yeah.
Well,
listen, Sean, thanks very much for your time. I really, really enjoyed it, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you. Great to do it with you. Yeah?
No problem.
Cheers. Thanks.